In this video, I'll be sharing my camera recommendations for 2024, where I've already spent all the time researching the latest tech and drawing from my own experience in the field so that you could skip right to the fun part and decide what to buy. Now there's a dozen or more companies that produce the majority of consumer camera bodies, but for a while now, Sony and Canon have been the front runners in user-friendly mirrorless tech. So to keep things simple, I'm limiting my comparison to these two brands. I think it's easy for beginners to get hung up on all the different cameras and manufacturers, but just be aware that it can unnecessarily suck your time, energy, and of course money. But because I'm not able to cover all the possible options in this video, the next video on camera specs will give you some tips on how to decide whether a camera you're interested in will be a good fit for the job. Also, when talking about features, I've focused the discussion on video specs, mostly because in my opinion, the premium photography features like high burst shooting or high megapixel count aren't necessarily going to make your real estate photos any better. What's more important for image quality is the glass that you put in front of the camera's sensor. And with wide angle lenses especially, it's important to get high quality glass because the cheaper lenses tend to create more noticeable vignetting and barrel distortion. Because your wide angle lens will play such a big role in your camera setup for real estate photography, I've factored in the available options at each price point to help you compare the quality of the entire system as opposed to just the body. So the first question to consider when shopping for a camera is how much money do you want to spend? If you have no money to spend on equipment right now, you can always start practicing your skills with the camera on your smartphone. Many of the new smartphones have a built-in wide-angle lens, but if your phone doesn't have one, you can always look into a third-party lens attachment like the 18mm from Moment. But if you're looking to go pro and start a legit business, I'd say $1,000 is the minimum that you should spend on a beginner camera and lens setup. If you need to save money, try buying used gear, and if you go that route, it helps to go through a major retailer like B&H, who has a reliable rating system and a friendly return policy. So starting with cameras under $1,000, first up is the Canon EOS R50 with the RF 10-18 f4 lens. Canon is really popular for having a user-friendly interface, great autofocus, and robust colors straight out of camera. The APS-C sensor on this camera has 24 megapixels and can shoot slow motion video at 60 frames per second in 1080p. For $200 more, Canon also has the R10, which can shoot up to 60 frames in 4K, but it adds an additional 1.5 times crop factor, which is on top of the APS-C crop, meaning it's basically unusable for shooting wide angle real estate videos, so I wouldn't recommend it. Now, in the same price range as the R50, Sony makes the ZV-E10, an APS-C sensor camera with nearly identical specs. The most noticeable difference on the ZV-E10 is that it doesn't have a EVF or electric viewfinder, which isn't the end of the world, but I personally think it's really useful on the job when you're reviewing some footage in bright daylight or trying to pull focus on a video shot. However, when compared to the APS-C cameras from Canon, Sony has a wider range of third-party lenses to choose from. I found at least 5 decent lens options at a reasonable price point, my favorite being the Sigma 10-18 f2.8 and the Tamron 11-20 f2.8. With no third-party lens options for Canon RF cameras, you'll need to go with their native APS-C glass, and there's two options: the RF 10-18 f4, which is around $300, then it jumps up to $2,300 for the RF 10-20mm f4, so big price differential between these two lenses, but you'll see a few more lens options when you get into Canon's full-frame cameras. I'd say if you're looking for the cheapest and most user-friendly camera to get started, then go with the Canon R50 and the RF 10-18 lens. If you can afford to spend a bit more money, I'd say the Sony ZV-E10 paired with a Sigma 10-18 will provide a better overall image and video quality, but lacking the EVF, I think the user experience would be worse. Moving on to the next category, we have the $1,000 to $2,000 price range. In fall of 2023, Sony released some big updates with the new a6700. It features uncropped 4K 60 video, Sony's new AI autofocus chip, dual native ISO for improved low light performance, and a fully articulating screen that wasn't found on the older models. I still recommend the same lenses from the ZV-E10, the Sigma 10-18, and the Tamron 11-20, but if you can afford to double down on the body, I'd honestly skip the ZV-E10 and go with the a6700 from the start, which provides more pro features that you can grow into. Canon has two options here, both priced at $1,500. The R7, which is an APS-C sensor camera with a slightly larger body, and then the R8 gets a full frame sensor with a slightly smaller body and better battery. Comparing the footage from these two, I'd go with the R8 because of the improved low light performance, plus with the full frame sensor, you get access to more lens options at different price points. If you pair the R8 with the 15-30 f4, then you've got another solid system for around $2,000 total. Moving into the $2,000 to $3,000 price range, you tend to get the most value for your money in this range, so consider starting here if you're looking to make a long-term investment in your business. In this category, we have two popular mirrorless cameras, both retailing for around $2,500. Canon makes the R6 Mark II and Sony makes the A7 IV. On paper, both of these cameras have a lot in common: full frame sensors, in-body image stabilization, articulating screens, excellent autofocus, and impressive low light performance. There is one quirky drawback on the Sony. Even though it's a full frame, the 4K 60 comes with a 1.5 crop factor. So if you plan to use 4K 60 for your videos, you might be able to work around that using an E-mount APS-C lens, but this is neither recommended by the manufacturer nor ideal, because when you switch over to shooting photos, you're not going to have that same crop. Alternatively, if you're okay shooting video in 1080p, then you could pick up a Sigma 14-24 or a Sony 16-35 G Master as your lens. Alternatively, you could opt for the Sony ZV-E1 in this price range, but like the ZV-E10, with the lack of an EVF, I just don't think it's ideal for hybrid photography work. Now, to be fair to Sony, Canon's first generation R6 also had its quirks, mainly that it overheated and it would shut down when recording in higher resolutions and frame rates. But it seems like those issues have been solved on the R6 Mark II, and I think it's the clear winner in this category. Because you'll mostly be shooting around f8, you can get away with the RF 14-35 f4 lens, but if you want to get more creative with your detail shots, then opt for the fast aperture on the RF 15-35 f2.8. Moving on to the $3,000 to $4,000 range, I'd say this is where you get the highest quality for your money. Both manufacturers offer two unique camera options here, optimizing one for photo and one for video. So at this price point, Sony makes the A7S III and the A7R5, S standing for low light sensitivity and R standing for resolution. The A7R5 can shoot up to 8K video at 24 frames and 4K 60 and 10-bit, but the main feature is the 60 megapixel sensor for high resolution stills. I'd say this camera is perfect for someone who's doing a lot of photography work other than real estate, or looking to shoot higher end architecture or magazine work. However, the trade-off for more megapixels is typically decreased low light performance, which is why we have the A7S III in the same price range. Since it was released, the A7S III has become one of the most popular cameras of all time. I've used it in the past 3 years, and what makes it so amazing is its high ISO capability for shooting interior video and night shots. It's got a 12 megapixel full frame sensor, so more optimized for shooting video than stills, but more than enough resolution for professional photography work, as long as you're not looking to make large prints. For both cameras, I'd again recommend the Sigma 14-24 or the Sony 16-35 G Master, and for the big ballers, there's the Sony 12-24 G Master. Now, if you're undecided between going for a 14-24 or 16-35, the advantage of having the wider 14mm option is useful when shooting smaller spaces, while a 35mm lens can help you be more creative and versatile with your detail shots. In this price range, Canon also has two options, the R5 and the R5C cinema version. So the R5 has been really popular among photographers for its 45 megapixel sensor, while also being able to record up to 8K video. However, the camera became notorious among videographers after its release, with major overheating issues recording at the higher resolutions. I think this was mainly an issue for shooting continuous video, so it likely wouldn't be an issue for the short clips that you're shooting in real estate. But in response to this, 2 years later, Canon released the R5C, which is their cinema specific model that added some new cooling vents, a video-centric interface, and 8K 60 raw video recording, which is pretty insane. Now, the retail price on the R5C used to be around $4,300, but I think it's come down a bit since it was released, so I'm including it in this range. Overall, every camera in this category offers incredible features and image quality, and the decision here comes down to personal preference. Now, I'm a bit biased here for Sony, but the A7S III is my overall pick for value and quality when it comes to real estate work. In the video department, it's been super reliable, never having any overheating issues, while the 12 megapixel sensor still provides great photo quality. And actually, the smaller file sizes help me save hard drive space and give me faster upload times. While I haven't used either of them, the quality and the features on both the R5 and the R5C look phenomenal. And if you prefer the Canon interface or are already invested in Canon glass, either camera could be your daily driver for real estate photography. I'd personally go with the R5 for its smaller form factor, because the 8K raw video is a bit overkill for most real estate work, in my opinion, especially considering how large those file sizes would be. But of course, the R5's reliability for video is questionable with the overheating, so if you're doing more video work, then I'd say go for the R5C and then just shoot in 4K 60. Now, there's rumors that the R5 Mark II will be released in spring 2024, so if you're considering buying an R5, be sure to do a quick internet search and check if the new release date has been announced. This is actually good practice to do with any camera model because every 2 to 3 years a new model is typically released, and then after that the older version will typically depreciate in value. So the final category is $4,000 plus, and I'd call this the category of diminishing returns because you don't really get much more value for the added cost. The features on flagship cameras like the Sony A1 and the Canon R3 are definitely improved over cameras in the last category, but when you consider that most real estate photos are being downsized for the MLS or that videos are being viewed on small mobile screens, that extra quality doesn't necessarily translate into a better product for the consumer. For real estate media, it's more important to focus on having efficient and fast turnarounds, and working with higher quality footage will take more time, more storage, and more processing power on your computer. So if you do opt for the A1 or the R3, I probably wouldn't record in 8K or RAW for most jobs. That said, if you want the best mirrorless cameras that money can buy, then these two are some of the best options out there. So I'll end with a reminder not to get too hung up when deciding what camera to buy. So that about does it for my camera recommendations for real estate photography in 2024. I hope they were helpful, and if you want to learn how to shoot professional real estate photos in just 10 minutes, then be sure to check out this video. And so you don't have to take notes, I've created a free 7-page ebook where I've condensed a lot of the knowledge from these videos to help you if you're just getting started out in real estate photography. And you can download that by clicking the link in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.